Howdy folks, this is Head DM and welcome to the first episode of my series, The Nuance of D&D. The Nuance of D&D is, well, as the name suggests, a series about the more nuanced things about this hobby of Dungeons & Dragons. I'm going to be talking about nuances behind races, classes, backgrounds. I'm going to be talking about table etiquettes. I'm going to be talking about roleplay tips and tricks. I'm going to be talking about a lot of things that just don't involve numbers. Something that a lot of people on this platform don't seem to really do. And I feel a lot of these are going to be important for newer and older players to learn or to remember. A quick channel update thing that I didn't put in my channel update intro video is that I want to try and upload these at least once every 2 weeks and maybe surprise you with a sudden week in between load instead of, disappearing for 9 months on end with absolutely no communication. This way, I hope to keep you guys engaged, keep you guys informed on all this stuff, and also give you guys some quality content as I actually put some focus into it. Without further ado, this beginning episode of this series is a great place to talk about beginnings. Specifically, some things that new players to the game should probably know before they take a step at the table. Now, I'm going to go ahead and talk about 3 major things. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to talk about is a piece of advice for newer players. The idea of be not afraid. When I say this, I mean don't be scared to do things within the game or even a little bit outside of the game. One of the things I notice with many newer players is that some tend to be pretty shy when it comes to doing things such as talking to NPCs or even some player characters, or doing X thing in battle, or even thinking of doing something funny like seduce the dragon. This fear can stem from many different reasons, but the most common one I've seen is because they don't want to screw up and mess up the game as a whole. Well, I have good news for you. Unless you are trying to be a pain on purpose, or you're doing things that actively harm the party in or out of game, then you cannot mess up D&D. It is physically impossible. D&D is a game about passing and failing actions and tasks using your wits, your actual roleplay ability, and the die rolls. But you can never succeed at a crazy thing that you want to do if you don't try to do it. Most of the time, NPC chats or dragon seductions can be more fun than expected, especially if you try some of the crazy stuff that you're probably thinking you want to do. The game thrives on chaos and random ideas that are so stupid, they might just work. If it fails, you can just roll initiative and kill all your problems. To the DMs out there with newer players, you aren't off the hook either. In these cases, you DMs can give players a chance to shine at a task that they are equipped to do as a player, not necessarily just a character. And you can let them learn through it. If you give a newer player an opportunity to do a wild, crazy thing to enhance the story, the RP, or the combat, but has no massive drawbacks if they fail it, then you can help them by giving them this opportunity to start to leave their shells behind, which is a great way to start building their roleplay. The second thing I want to cover today is as much about the world of the game as it is about respect for the party and the dungeon master. Staying focused. I know it's easy to get distracted by phones, books, and other things people use on a daily basis to avoid boredom, but not being focused on a game you are in can make it hard for the whole table. When you aren't focused, you can miss big details and force the group to lose time by recounting it to you because you were distracted. In combat, this can also heavily slow down the game, as you have no idea what your party or the enemy has done to change the combat state. This makes it hard to plan your moves in advance. Speaking of which, I always highly advise that you start planning your next move as soon as you end your turn each round. This can greatly help speed up the game, and trust me, your friends will thank you for this. Being distracted can also come off as being disrespectful to some people. It's usually seen as being bored, but staying anyway, or being half invested while the rest of the party is deep in the game and invested themselves as they go to slay this dragon. and it can feel like carrying a dead weight around. Now, whether that is the intention of your being distracted or not, it can come off in this way. Long story short, your party and the Dungeon Master have invested themselves in the game, and you should invest yourself too and be part of the fun. The last thing I want to talk about, and frankly the most important thing I want to talk about in this video, is in regards to character creation. And it might be a little controversial what I'm about to say. I believe when making your first few characters, it is absolutely okay and justified to plagiarize.
No, all right. I know that sounds bad.
Guess what? Your DM probably plagiarized half of their campaign. So why shouldn't you? DMs, you should always allow new players to take this option because it can provide many benefits to these newer players when they are getting into this amazing hobby. When you pick a character from something you like, such as Boba Fett from Star Wars, and you make them into D&D, you are giving yourself a base to work with so that much of the character is already familiar to you and you didn't have to make it yourself. With a character's personality, looks, and possibly their backstory completely covered because you took it from a different piece of media, it is easier for you to focus on role-playing the character and develop your skills as a role player. One of the hardest parts of making a character is how to role play them. It can be difficult to decide if they're an edgy, shy, or wholesome individual, or any other personality type. So having one pre-made is a huge bonus for folks that are new to the hobby. However, it can be fun to put some spins on the character and make them closer to your own. Here's a list of things to consider when translating a character from other media sources into D&D. Number 1, feel free to change the name and looks to better fit the setting of the game. This can also allow you to start making the character more of your own and not just literally Boba Fett from Star Wars. Number 2, work with your DM to see how to convert the character's backstory into one that fits the game setting and narrative if you want to use that character's backstory. Don't just throw a sci-fi backstory into a fantasy game or vice versa. There is no reason that Boba Fett is a clone of a man in a Star Wars universe and just so happens to be in a fantasy setting. It also doesn't really work to take a character and say, through universal bullshit and time traveling and universe hopping, they somehow accidentally ended up in this universe. That is always a terrible idea. It's best to make the character originate in the world that you are currently building with the DM and make sure that they fit without having to be from a separate dimension or the future or something. Number 3, if you want to practice voices, here is a very good place to start. Practicing this character's voice as you remember it is the first step to learning more voices and being able to make unique sounding characters in the future. All 3 of these things culminate into something that is still a template for you to use while also being partially your own. For example, one of my first characters that I ever made was a kobold drunken fist monk by the name of Octavius Scott. When making this character, I plagiarized parts of one of my favorite characters from one of my favorite video games and put them in this character. I used the voice and personality of the Demo Man from Team Fortress 2, and I took the Jedi robes and the design from Star Wars, specifically Obi-Wan Kenobi's robes. The Demo Man is a Scottish drunkard who don't think twice about who he's gonna blow up. He always has a bottle of some kind of drink on him. Octavius is the perfect example of what a good plagiarized character can be. He's a favorite at every table I bring him to, and he is still to this day my favorite character I have ever made. I literally can't stop reusing this guy, and your plagiarized character may become just like this for you. Over time, your character can easily evolve and change as you play them, and become more unique compared to the source character you base them on, becoming their own identity, separate from the source material. That's why I highly recommend this move for anyone who's new to the game. However, I must put here, you should always work with your dungeon master on these kinds of plagiarized characters. That way you can fit them into the story of the game and find a place amongst the party. Always discuss character ideas and things with your dungeon master, because more likely than not, they'll let you do it with some edits to make sure that it's going to be totally fitting into the game. And that's one thing I don't think is stated enough. You should be talking to your DM about almost everything regarding your character, especially if you think it's not really important, because the DM will find some way to make the unimportant parts Very important for an amazing story. So yeah, TLDR, always speak to your DM. That's all I have for you today, folks. I hope you found this helpful and educational, something that you can bring to your tables later on. And if you like what you saw today, feel free to like and subscribe. If you don't, that's totally fine. I also have a Dungeons & Dragons community server, link in the description, if you want to go find yourself a few online games or start an online game of your own. We're always looking for new DMs over there. And with that, I bid you all farewell!